There we
Whatever.
go.
There you are. Hi, welcome. Um, Everyone's just arriving now, so we may have some uh people pop in because we start at 1.
Oh, sure.
But we will get started. So I'm going to read your bio and then start with a question, and then I'll open up questions from the group, okay?
Sure.
Okay. So Blake Butler is the author of 12 book-length works, including Molly, Alice Knott, 300 Million, There Is No Year, and Scorch Atlas, as well as the non-fictional Nothing, A Portrait of Insomnia. His short fiction, interviews, reviews, and essays have appeared widely, including in the New York Times, Harper's, the Paris Review, Fensbaum Book Forum, and as an ongoing column in Vice. In 2021, he was longlisted for the Joyce Carol Oates Prize. Blake, welcome. And I thought we could kick off maybe with a discussion, as someone who's written many novels, if you could talk about how you used the accumulated instincts that you have for fiction and skill that you have at fiction in writing for the memoir.
You cut in a little bit. You cut out a little bit at the beginning of that. Would you mind repeating?
Oh, sure. I I wanted to ask you to talk about how you use the tools of fiction for memoir, basically.
Good.
Like,
Yeah. Good question. It's difficult to say. I think maybe it begins with like I often write without knowing where I'm going. I might know where I begin, but I don't know where I'm going, and that's kind of the fun of it. And so that's a tactic I use in both. I think in memoir it's even a little bit easier because with memory you're like, oh, I definitely want to write about this moment, this time, and then I also like um, the structure of paragraphs and the way they connect to one another. So I'm always thinking about where does this paragraph leave off? What energy does it leave behind? And how can I not just follow the dots to the next paragraph, but what would be interesting to make a jump here? I feel like the closing of a paragraph is an opportunity to jump. So those are some similarities. It's both are a process of exploration, but I think memoir, in that it relies on facts, is more difficult to me. I actually really don't like writing nonfiction for that reason because yeah, fiction feels more boundless, but it also feels more purposeful because it's easier to get an audience to follow you, I guess.
is that true that memoir is still easier, has a much bigger audience than fiction?
At least from my experience, I mean, like I write rather difficult fiction that's kind of opaque, and so I've always kind of just expected that it had a small audience anyway. And even though this book in particular is dark and heavy like my fiction, you can see the humanity, like when you're talking about life, it just like some of the doubt that I think clouds fiction, where you're like, what's the motivation for this? You're making, you have to like earn the cachet a little bit more maybe. And whereas with memoir, you still have to earn something, but uh, it's less like this peak in the distance that you gotta have no certainty of how to get there, if that makes sense.
It does. A lot of people come to memoir class with, difficult material that they want to write about. And sometimes, they're confronted with pain as they write, emotional pain. Do you have any kind of technique for that? Or like, how did you, obviously, you were addressing not only very difficult and painful material, but material that you still had like turmoil, and you're the part of the memoir is working through that. But I just wanted to know, like, when you hit into the pain, like, how did you move forward or move through, or did you take breaks, etc.?
Yeah, good question. So my process changed a lot with this project because I've always been a sit at the desk all day, or as long as the time allows you. Whereas with this, it was just like I still came to the desk, but it was like I can't I can't spend all day inside this mind state. So giving yourself permission to get up more and walk around and like leave incomplete. I still would try to like leave enough, get enough done where I could know where I was when I came back, but not ass in chair no longer really applies when you're in pain. So so I mean, like in the beginning, and I started writing this when I was in really intense pain. So in some ways, it was like a relief because I knew if I can go back to this time, pull out what I can use, and make it into something else that doesn't just live in my head, then that will be worth it, even though it sucks right now. And I questioned that a lot along the way, even all the way up to like they had to pry it out of my hands because it wasn't going to get to the done printing in time. So it was like, um, yeah, I lost my train of thought there, but I think just giving yourself permission to know that it is difficult and that if you're honest and you're real about what you're doing, it's going to be better on the other side, because giving form to something formless is one of the beautiful things about the whole process, right? So it's not, yeah, you might want to quit in the middle, or you might think this is just too much, but I'm really glad I did. I mean, even when the book came out though, I was like, was this right? Was this the right choice? And I kind of like, there's some blind faith that I think I've always just been good at accessing, but with this, it was kind of like, and I guess maybe the other point to make from that is to like, with fiction, I would never let anyone read anything I was working on until it was a book, besides my editor. With this, I still was very protective with it, but I was like, it feels less like you're giving something away when you give a memoir, because especially to someone that knows you and has written about themselves. So I think like finding the right people that you can trust to get feedback from, that know you and know things about you that you may even can't see. I was constantly asking people like, what can I not see about myself that's on the page here? Like, please tell me, so being vulnerable is important.
Okay, who has a question for Blake? Yes, Bree. Oop, yeah.
Hi, I unmuted myself. Hi, thanks for being here, Blake.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how, in the beginning of the book, you talk about your choice to leave yourself in it. Like you hadn't wanted to necessarily write yourself in, but you had to in order to tell Molly's story. And um, I'm wondering how you stayed focused on Molly, particularly when you obviously had the deaths of both your parents within the same decade and obviously other stuff going on in your life, but you really managed to stay focused on her. And I'm wondering if you had like cues on how to edit that other noise out or those other things out that,
Mm.
if you understand.
Yeah, I totally do. Yeah, it's so much of like what goes where and what belongs and what doesn't. And so like the early draft of this book, I thought I was writing about her only. And I included myself to the extent that it could help, but I really didn't understand until someone told me, who read it and was like, what, you need to, like, you're spilling really dark stuff here, and like the only way you can do it that way, but like the reader's going to trust you a lot more if you're equally forthcoming, because this book isn't the story of Molly's life, it's the story of your life with her. And that was a big thing for me to understand as a person. Like I said at the beginning, like I don't really like writing about myself and I don't like sharing those things, but I think I felt motivated by rage and anger in the beginning, because I was mad at the ways the world I felt contributed to her choice to die, and I was mad at her, but in a way I couldn't quite quantify. And so the more I started saying like, I am a part of this story and it is my story, and like to try to write a book that would be like more like a biography isn't my job. I'm too, especially in the early years, so I needed someone to say, you are a part of this story, and the story of you surviving what happened to her is equally as interesting, if not more so, than the material of just death, so once I learned that, I started going back and saying, yeah, my mom is in the, my mom, I think my mom wasn't in the original version, but like to understand the time of life that we went through that led to her death, my mom was a major figure. So once I cracked that and then I started to, I think another interesting thing is like, yeah, you begin with saying, oh, I definitely want to write this scene, I definitely want to write about this, I definitely want to write this, and then you're like, okay, well, like, what about what goes between them? So once I had some of the like bigger polls that were based around Molly in there, I was able to be like, oh, like, and it helped to have her journals too, because I would write about it and then I'd go read her journal and be like, oh my god, I didn't even remember that aspect, and that would unlock, well, like, that's what was going on with her, but I had forgotten what was going on with me, and suddenly it all makes sense in the context. So I think it really is a process of trial and error, and like some pins that you think are going to work don't work the way they work, and some you have to write in order to figure out what you want to write. But so I'm kind of a like write a whole bunch and then like it's more like sculpting at times, you know, when especially in the once you start to get a bigger document in front of you. But yeah, trusting your gut and like, where does your interest lie? Because like, if you're interested and you're being honest and you're pulling apart some things that are making sense to you, like, I think readers are more willing to go there than we realize sometimes. Like, I think so much of the memoir publishing and just publishing in general is like, have big points and like come away with an overarching solution or resolution or moral here, and it's like, like, I'm not looking to make a moral out of my wife's suicide. I'm looking to just like share the experience, and like a smart reader knows what to do with that, and I'm looking for the smart reader rather than the sales why ever else you read other than to learn. I don't know.
I love that. I love that. Okay, who else has a question for Blake? Emily.
Hi, Blake. One of the things that interested me a lot about your book was your willingness to go there with a spouse who committed suicide and what it was like to be in this high-risk situation. And I was wondering how you chose what you would and could and could not, or would and would not tell about Molly, because I saw that it's your story because you survived her, and the two of you were together at that time. So I just wondered how you chose what to put in and how hard it was with things you left out.
Yeah, good question. So like, there was a shift for me when I first started writing about her in general. It was just it was for me, and it was just like vomit writing and like diaristic writing. And I shared that with one or two people, and that was just to like, because I felt this chaos in my head and I needed it, but it wasn't, I still didn't know how to share that with anyone else, you know? So once the book shifted into an actual project when someone asked me to write a essay to memorialize her with some of her work that there was like a memorial issue of a magazine. And so having that prompt of saying this, I'm writing to someone, where, you know, a lot of my writing has been like, I write for myself, I don't care about the world, but this was like I said, it was partially out of anger, but also partially of saying like, this person's life is going to disappear because I feel like I'm the only one that knows what happened, since she was kind of like antisocial and all these things. So when I began, I picked things that I thought could contribute to showing the mind state she existed in, and the context of it. And then I didn't want to just be, you know, for instance, I did not write about the adultery, and that's why it shows up so late in the book.
Mm-hmm.
It also shows up late in the book because I didn't find that out. So I really just tried to not be prurient about it, not be though I'm in emotion, I tried to be very objective and say like, this is going to help someone understand this situation, and maybe some of my more precious memories don't have words that I can make that into, and also maybe some of there's a lot of more extreme things she did that I didn't include because I was worried that, well, it could hurt people again. I didn't want, you know, like, she's dead, and I think a lot of people have shown defense about like, don't attack a dead person, but like, I'm worried about the living. Not, you can't exploit a dead person. She's not here to speak back, and like, so to me it was a matter of how can I tell the truth without creating more trauma, and that's not to say avoid things that are potentially upsetting, because there's healing in sharing that, and there's healing in letting other people know that they're not the only one that feels that. So I don't know, yeah, like, and I think like you can always write things and then remove them, you know? So like, I think like the first time I tried to write about the adultery, I was like, let me just see what happens. And like, if I don't want to put this in, I don't have to. And then once I wrote it, I was like, well, you just can't understand her situation without it. So it became obvious at a certain point. But so, yeah, like, I think like, though we're writing with an audience in mind often with memoir in particular, it's still your work and it's still your world and you're the master of it. And like, trust your gut. And then like, yeah, maybe at a certain point, trust someone who you really also would value their opinion. But I think the gut tells you a lot of the time whether it belongs, either because you can't find the right way to say it or because it leads you to something that's more appropriate than the thing that got you there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you're writing something that's something that's really complicated and you get it to the page, it either leads to a dead end of kind of like anger and rage and shame, or it's a door to like a million, to several or more other really important stories or moments, right? I think is that what you're saying? That's for some things, the only way to know is to get it to the page and see what
Right.
happens.
Yeah. Because like, I mean, at least for me, it's like talking in therapy and words coming out of my mouth. It's not modeled in any way. And I like to have the control of like, I write this sentence and then look at it and see what it says and what does that make me want to say next. And you can kind of play with language in the same way you would with fiction, even though your chemistry set is reality. It's still, language is still technology and still mutative, and like you can do a lot with it. So yeah, experiment and see. Because yeah, I think like those paths lead to places you wouldn't just say, oh, I want to say that, you know.
Yeah, Monique.
Hi, thank you so much for being here with us. Just a quick question about, since the book has come out and all the fanfare around it, have you found that to be also maybe difficult because it's such a difficult thing? And how have you, I guess, managed that?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, like, it's caught me completely off guard. It's weird to come out of 4 years of feeling taken care of, and like when I speak about it, people believe me and listen to me and want to take care of me, and putting your private thoughts into the public forum. I think I had a little bit of like too much cavalier, like, well, on one hand, I was just like, I know I'm gonna do this, so I'm just gonna close my eyes and jump. But I thought the world is mature enough to not take a dump in this temple, and like and that's not what happened. I kind of got slapped in the face just on the surface of people saying, how dare you write about a dead woman's sexuality, and I had already come to grips with why I did it. So though I like logically understood that I had done the right thing and people were telling me that, my gut went sour, and I felt like, man, I've taken this thing that like I had to be really careful with because it threatened my life to speak about it or think about it, and now I've really opened the door to the market, and like those people don't always care, and also even the positive press, it was like so much of the positive press was about discussing the negative side of the press that I'm like, did you guys even hear what I said? Is all of these great reviews going to be about a 10-page part of the book that like is the way people are talking about it is so miscast that like so I mean, like, through December and January, I slept through December and January when all that was happening, because I was just like, even the good stuff felt like you still don't get it, and you're still like trying to make an example out of me in a way that it doesn't feel true and isn't why I wrote this book. And so as I've like gotten through some of the hurdles of publication and like talked to real people in classrooms like this or in readings or just getting emails, and some of the later criticism has started to actually process the book. So I'm just like, I think we're all trained to think, and for right reasons, because like I did this book with a small press and I was bitter about it at first, but now I'm really glad, because like I think with major press publishing, a lot of the times it's like you either start selling and hit those big licks or you're out, and like and you drop off the list. And So, but that's not true. And especially with something that you've put your life into, that a memoir requires you, it's like people, it'll take longer for people to come around, especially with, you know, I've had to have friends be reminding me like, dude, this book is really upsetting. Like, that's why it's causing this. And like, I think I had even forgotten what the book said at a certain point, because all the revision, all the PR, all this other crap, it's like, your mind just starts to not even see reality anymore. And so like, I'm really glad that I did the readings and I'm doing these talks, because it is kind of bringing some humanity back to me. But at the same time, I'm really ready to like start moving the story of just the book being thrown into the world and causing a splash. Like, I'm ready for that to be over, and like to like get to the real issues that the book brings up, which is life and death, you know. So
Last question, what are you working on now? Or are you working on a novel? Will you ever write a memoir again?
I'm back to writing fiction right now. I'm writing a novel. I didn't really write fiction while I was working on this, and I didn't know if I wanted to. I was like, this book was kind of a big FU at one point to me, is like, I'm gonna write this and be done, because I can't stand this world that I have to. But I'm finding the joy of fiction again. I'm finding the joy of writing again. And I definitely, like, before Molly died, I was wanting to write nonfiction about my parents, more specifically, and the Alzheimer's experience. And that's still on my mind, but I'm gonna need a few years, I think, to like recover the strength necessary. And fiction is definitely a more freer land for me. So
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us. And you've said so many things that I want to think more about, truly. So we really appreciate you being here, and wish you the very best luck with the next project, and with the ongoing conversation about this book.
awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Lizzie, for having me, and all of you for your questions. It was really, it just makes such a big difference to see faces and hear people. So thank you all. I appreciate it. See you later.